Over the last few years, Ohio State has had some really good quarterbacks. It started with guys such as JT Barrett and Dwayne Haskins, and then you had Justin Fields and CJ Stroud, who both went in the first round of their respective NFL draft classes. Ohio State has been used to having big-time elite quarterback play, and Kyle McCord was next up. He was a 5-star recruit out of high school, was the high school teammate of their superstar receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., and after spending plenty of time developing on the bench, he was ready to be the next big thing. Unfortunately, Kyle McCord ended up being very underwhelming at Ohio State this past year. He took over as the starter, and many Ohio State fans were ready to run him out of town. While he obviously was not bad, he was not at the same level as the guys before him, and that's why he ultimately decided to transfer, and he is now at Syracuse. In today's video though, I want to take a look back at Kyle McCord. We're going to talk about how he became a 5-star recruit to begin with, how he was supposed to be the next great Ohio State quarterback, what ended up happening for him this past season, and what the future will look like for him. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about what happened to Kyle McCord. So in order to understand what went wrong for McCord, we first need to go back in time. Football ran in his family tree, as his dad played for Rutgers back in the day, and he would pass that on to his son Kyle, who naturally loved the quarterback spot. One day he had his moment as a child, as during halftime of a Temple football game, he got to run onto the field as an 8-year-old and apparently threw a touchdown pass. The crowd would roar, and this was the moment when McCord was supposed to be a future superstar. His mom said, quote, "It was the cutest thing ever." He thought he was going to the Super Bowl, and for him it was serious business. From that point on throughout his whole life, he didn't want to miss practice, even when he was sick. Him and his older brother Cole would end up playing football and practice almost every day, and Kyle would quickly get scouts' attention due to his work ethic. His mom remembers that Kyle would wake up at 4:30 a.m. and started working out as a 13-year-old. He was 3 years away from getting his driver's license, so his mom would actually have to take him there. Eventually, McCord showed an extreme interest in playing quarterback, and his dad would become his first coach. He would teach him footwork and work on different concepts, and eventually he knew his son had a lot of potential. His brother noticed this pretty early on, as he said, quote, "I definitely noticed my dad wasn't coaching other kids as hard as he was on Kyle. From a young age, my dad was in his ear, telling him what it took to be a quarterback." In 6th grade, Kyle would start to become a bigger deal, as he would beat out an 8th grader for the starting quarterback job, and at the time his dad made him a promise. He promised Kyle if he could earn a Division I scholarship, that he would buy him a car. This would happen a short period later, as in the summer before McCord's 8th grade year, he ended up getting a Central Michigan offer. Looks like he got his car pretty early on. When it came time to picking a high school, he went across the Delaware River and decided to go to St. Joseph's. They had returned a quarterback from a state championship team, but Kyle did not back down. As a sophomore, he'd end up becoming the starter and exploded with over 2,800 yards with 38 touchdowns. In April of his sophomore year, he was starting to become an even bigger deal, but he was also starting to stagnate. Former Super Bowl MVP Phil Simms decided to reach out to him, and both him and his son would work with Kyle. They wanted to expand his athleticism and put more power into his throws. Simms said, quote, "The main thing he needed was to become a better athlete at the position. Physically he was maturing, but he was lacking some of the flexibility and mobility that a modern-day quarterback needs. After all of that, he'd become even more explosive on the field and in his recruitment. As a junior, he'd throw for a school record 2,800 yards with 38 touchdowns and a state championship. After that, he was recruited by nearly every school in the country and was considered a 5-star player. He eventually decided to pick Ohio State over 20 other offers. On his first visit to OSU, he'd spend a ton of time with both Ryan Day and Mike Yurcich, and then he came to the spring game and decided to commit after that. While this was a big get for Ohio State, it was sort of a big blow to the local school, Penn State. Kyle said, quote, "I think if you live in Pennsylvania, Penn State is the school everybody dreams of going to. They are probably my number 2 choice, but when Coach Day gave me the green light to commit, there was no doubt this was the place to be." His pledge was definitely huge to the Buckeyes, and it also helped them get a package deal, as Marvin Harrison Jr. would also commit. At the time, Harrison Jr. was a big deal, but he was not as hyped up as he is now. After Marvin Harrison Jr. committed, the two of them talked about playing together in the future. He said, quote, "It's cool to think 2 years from now we could be in the same position." Despite his 5-star status, McCord only had 20 offers, which is sort of low, and that's because he committed to the Buckeyes in April of 2019, 2 years before the class ended. As a 3-year starter there, McCord was a superstar. He led the Hawks to 3 straight state titles and finished with 6,800 yards and 88 touchdown passes. Both of those are city and league records. Coming out of high school, he was given comparisons to Matthew Stafford and was projected as a future second-round pick. 24/7 sports analyst Brian Don had this to say, Quote, he's a multi-year starter at a top 15 program and projects to be an early draft pick. According to 24/7 Sports, McCord was a 5-star recruit, the number 6 quarterback, and the 28th best player in the class of 2021. So how would Kyle end up doing at Ohio State? Well, let's take a look. McCord would arrive at Ohio State with a ton of fanfare, and he was considered the first true Plan A quarterback under Ryan Day. He was not a transfer, and he was always supposed to be the future. In 2021, he would end up being the backup quarterback to CJ Stroud, and McCord would see action in 5 total games. He'd end up throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns against Akron, and then in 2022, he would take on a much larger role. This time, he'd end up appearing in 7 games and threw for 1 touchdown. Now at 2 years under his belt, he'd be thrown into a quarterback battle with Devin Brown. Devin Brown was a late rising quarterback in the class of 2022, and some were questioning how this was even a quarterback battle. Was McCord just not good enough? Was Brown that good? No one really knew. But eventually, Coach Day decided to make a decision and said that both would be starting. He said, quote, I think that Kyle has done a great job showing consistency, but Devin has also shown he deserves to play. So expect both of them to play, and we have confidence in both of them. While McCord may not have impressed as much as many thought, he had a good supporting cast to help him out. He had All-American wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. and wide receivers Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, and tight end Cade Stover. He'd end up making his first career start against Indiana, and he didn't exactly impress. He threw for 239 yards without a touchdown and an interception. In weeks 2 and week 3, he would end up delivering, as he threw for nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, but this came against Western Kentucky and Youngstown State. The big moment for him was going to be against number 9 Notre Dame. On the road in a game that I was personally at, McCord showed poise, led them down the field, and they ended up beating the number 9 Irish 17-14. His 240 yards were great, but he didn't have a touchdown. He showed leadership capabilities, but he was just not producing. After that, he'd have a breakout performance against Maryland, as he threw for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in that win, and then after that, he would start to go off a little bit. He threw for 3 scores on the road against Purdue, threw for nearly 300 yards in a win over number 7 Penn State, and then had 2 more touchdowns and a road victory over Wisconsin. He was finally starting to find his footing, and he would finish the year strong. He had 3 touchdowns against Rutgers, 3 touchdowns against Michigan State, and then 2 touchdowns against Minnesota. While McCord was steadily improving over those 11 games, he still hadn't had one of those monster performances. Many were hoping it would come against number 3 Michigan, but that was wishful thinking. In the biggest regular season game of the 2023 season, McCord was a mixed bag. While he did throw for nearly 300 yards and 2 touchdowns against a really good Michigan defense, he also had 2 interceptions, one of which was unbelievably costly. McCord had a chance to lead them down the field and win, but unfortunately he made that bad decision, threw that pick, and they lost. This was now the 3rd straight loss to Michigan, and the fan base was not happy with him. I think most of this for Ohio State fans is just frustration that they keep losing to Michigan and that they would miss out on the college football playoff, but McCord took an absolute beating on social media. In total, he threw for over 3,000 yards with 24 touchdowns and 6 picks. He ended up leading them to an 11-1 record, and the only loss came in that finale game to Michigan. Jack Sawyer said, quote, I really felt bad for him and how he was treated after those games. I don't think it was fair, and I understand that Ohio State, the quarterback's expected to win games, but not all of that was his fault in that loss in Ann Arbor. As I said, McCord would quickly enter the transfer portal and would start to find his next school. He would thank both the coaching staff and the Buckeyes fan base, and he would decide to end up going to Syracuse. He said, quote, I decided to enter the transfer portal and explore other opportunities. I'm thankful for my time at Ohio State, and playing in the Scarlet and Gray was truly an honor. While this did stir some people up, it was okay to his team. Their star lineman Donovan Jackson said, quote, he chose what was best for him. I'm proud of wherever he goes and whatever he chooses, and I'm supporting him 1,000%. Honestly, I can't really say I blame him too much. McCord gave his heart and soul to Ohio State this past season, and it's not like he was that bad. He literally only had 6 interceptions and was steadily improving throughout the rest of the year. The bar set by Haskins, Fields, and Stroud was so ridiculously high, pretty much no one was going to be able to live up to it. While he may not have been a complete superstar, he was not that bad either, and I think one more year in that system, I think he would have been a lot better. Again, I think a lot of this is just frustration about not getting to the postseason, but either way, McCord was off. He's decided to join Fran Brown at Syracuse, and hopefully will have a big year and go off to the NFL. The quarterback situation is definitely really interesting right now. They bring back Devin Brown, who I'm really not that high on. They also bring back Lincoln Kienholz, and then they brought in a couple of names. They got both Julian Sayin and Aaron Noland out of high school, and then brought Will Howard over from Kansas State. Currently, Howard is expected to be the starting quarterback, but honestly, I don't know if it's that much of an upgrade over McCord. I think they both have the same ceiling, and I just don't see that much of an upgrade. I definitely think Aaron Noland and Julian Sayin both have a ton of promise, but they're definitely not going to be ready. Do I think it's a mistake that Ohio State ran Kyle McCord out of town? I don't know yet. It's cliche, but we're really just going to have to wait and see. But what do you guys think? If you're an Ohio State fan, what do you think went wrong for Kyle McCord? Who's really to blame for all this? And what do you think of this year's quarterback battle? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down below, and let me know another player I could take a look at in my next What Happened To video. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.